A war widow kneels at her husband's grave, but the man buried there isn't her husband, and she is not alone. Her name was Eleanor Sullivan. The headstone was weathered, the grass bleached by the sun of Red Mesa, but the name carved into the stone was clear. Michael James Sullivan, beloved husband, gone too soon. She placed a bouquet of wildflowers on the dirt, her black dress pooling around her like a shadow. I found it, Michael, she whispered to the cold stone. But now I don't know what to do. 2 years. 2 years she had mourned a man she thought she knew, a death she thought she understood. She was wrong, dead wrong, because hidden in the shadow of a tall pine tree, a man was watching her. He stood perfectly still, a predator's silence. One of his eyes was gray as a storm cloud. The other was a shocking, piercing blue. Eleanor didn't see him. She was lost in her own world, pulling a worn Bible from her satchel. It was Michael's. His cramped handwriting filled the margins, a secret language only she could understand. "Why, Michael?" she whispered, tracing a line of his script. "Why keep such a secret?" The man in the shadows shifted, just a fraction of an inch, but it was enough. A bird shot out from the tree with a startled cry. Eleanor's head snapped up. Her hand clutched the Bible to her chest, her heart hammering. She scanned the cemetery, seeing nothing but headstones and long shadows in the dying light. But the feeling was there, that prickling on the back of her neck, the chilling certainty that she was being watched. She had felt it every day for the 3 weeks she'd been in this town. Shaking it off, she stood, brushed the dust from her skirt, and began the walk back toward Red Mesa. She promised the grave she'd be back. She had no idea how true that was. Only when her slim figure had vanished into the golden haze of sunset did the man step out from behind the tree. His name was Gabriel Blackwood. He moved with a quiet grace that didn't fit his large frame, and he approached the grave not as a threat, but as a man paying his respects. He looked down at the name carved in the stone. "She's here, Michael," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Just like you said she would be." From his coat, he pulled a small carved wooden feather, blackened to look like a raven's wing. He placed it next to Eleanor's flowers. "I'm keeping my promise," he whispered to the dead man, "though God knows she won't thank either of us when she learns the truth." The Red Mesa schoolhouse was a single sun-bleached room on the edge of town. Inside, Eleanor Sullivan tried to pretend her world wasn't falling apart. She was the new school teacher, a respectable widow putting her life back together, or so the town thought. She called a young girl to the blackboard, a 10-year-old with honey-colored braids named Sarah Morgan. The girl was bright, but painfully shy. An orphan, living with her grandmother, Martha, a woman the town whispered was touched in the head. As Sarah worked on the math problem, her tongue sticking out in concentration, Eleanor felt a pang of affection for the quiet child. "Very good, Sarah," Eleanor praised as the girl finished. The girl's face lit up. "Thank you, Mrs. Sullivan. My papa was good with numbers, too." A shadow crossed Eleanor's face. Sarah's papa had died in the old Sullivan mine, the same mine her husband Michael had been interested in. A coincidence? Eleanor was beginning to learn there were no coincidences in Red Mesa. She noticed a folded piece of paper on Sarah's desk. "What's that you're drawing, Sarah?" The girl unfolded it to reveal a childish, yet strangely detailed drawing of a very tall man with a long, dark coat. The face was crude, but the eyes were distinct. One was colored gray, the other blue. A chill, cold and sharp, ran down Eleanor's spine. "The giant by the creek," Sarah whispered. "Grandma says he watches over people." "Have you seen him?" Eleanor asked, her voice tight. Sarah nodded. "Sometimes. He doesn't talk, but he leaves little carved animals on the rocks for me." Before Eleanor could ask more, the schoolhouse door banged open. Mayor Harrison filled the doorway, his large belly straining the buttons of his waistcoat. His wife, Clara, hovered behind him, her face a mask of pinched disapproval. "Mrs. Sullivan," the mayor boomed, "a word, if you please. Town business." The sun was harsh, the air thick with dust. Mayor Harrison and his wife had positioned themselves in the shade, forcing Eleanor to stand in the blinding light, looking up at them. It was a power play, and she knew it. "Getting settled in all right, are we?" Clara Harrison asked, her voice as dry as the dirt beneath their feet. "Quite well, thank you." Eleanor replied, her back ramrod straight. The mayor cleared his throat. Yes, well, there's been some concern about your teaching. Concern? Some parents, Clara said, her smile never reaching her eyes, feel you're filling the children's heads with stories of universities in far-off places, ideas above their station. The message was clear. Don't teach these children to dream. Don't teach them to question. My only intention is to provide them with the tools to make their own choices, Eleanor said, her voice firm. The mayor's friendly mask slipped, revealing something hard and ugly underneath. Just remember, Mrs. Sullivan, your position here is conditional. Conditional on fitting in with our values. Clara's eyes narrowed. And speaking of fitting in, we've heard you've been asking questions. Questions about the old Sullivan claim. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her face a calm, placid mask. My late husband had business interests in the area. I'm simply trying to put his affairs in order. Admirable, the mayor said, his tone dripping with fake sincerity. But I should warn you, property matters out here are complicated, best left to those who understand the territory. The threat was veiled, but unmistakable. And be careful where you go poking around, Clara added, her voice a venomous whisper. Not everyone in Red Mesa appreciates outsiders stirring up the past. As they turned to leave, Eleanor heard Clara's final chilling words to her husband. She's definitely looking for it. We need to send word to Bishop. Bishop. The name hit Eleanor like a physical blow, a name she'd heard only once before, whispered in Michael's last letter. The letter that had arrived a week after the military told her he was dead. Watch for Bishop. Trust no one. That night, Eleanor's small cabin felt like a cage. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows. On the table, Michael's Bible lay open. She traced a passage he had underlined. For everything there is a season. In the margin, he'd written in their secret code, where light and shadow meet at the broken oak, look not up but down. The broken oak. Lightning tree pass. A landmark Michael had described in his letters. It was a clue, a starting point. She was just beginning to decipher what it meant when a sharp knock echoed on her door. It wasn't the wind. She froze, her hand instinctively closing the Bible. Who's there? It's Sarah Morgan, a small voice answered. My grandma sent me. She says it's important. Eleanor opened the door to find the little girl shivering on the porch, her face pale in the moonlight. Grandma said I had to bring you this, Sarah said, her eyes wide with fear. She said they would be coming tonight. Sarah pulled a small object wrapped in cloth from beneath her shawl. Eleanor unwrapped it. Inside was a small, tarnished brass key. Attached to it was a scrap of paper with a single word. Vigilance. Did she say anything else? Eleanor asked, her mind racing. Sarah nodded. She said the giant with the different colored eyes isn't the one you should fear. The child hesitated. And she said to check the chimney. Before Eleanor could ask what that meant, another knock slammed against the door. Louder, more insistent. Sarah's face went white with terror. Hide, Eleanor whispered, shoving the girl toward a small pantry. She pocketed the key just as the voice came through the door. Dr. Lawrence, Mrs. Sullivan, I apologize for the late hour. I've just come from treating Martha Morgan. She's asking for you. Relief washed over Eleanor, but only for a second. Dr. Lawrence, the town physician, had been kind to her. A widower, he seemed to understand her grief. But Martha had just sent Sarah with a warning. Trust no one. She opened the door. Dr. Lawrence stood there, his medical bag in hand, his face a mask of concern. Is Martha all right? Eleanor asked, letting him in. Another one of her episodes, I'm afraid, he said, his eyes scanning the cabin. Quite agitated. Talking about men buried in the earth? Harrison's sin. He set his bag on the table, his gaze lingering on the desk where she'd just hidden the Bible. You've made this place quite homey, he commented. Too casual. Too smooth. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Martha mentioned you've been asking about the old Sullivan claim, he said, his voice changing, losing its warmth. Eleanor's blood ran cold. As I told the mayor, I'm simply settling my husband's affairs. Ah, yes, your husband, Dr. Lawrence said. Curious thing, you've never mentioned exactly how he died. The air in the room grew thick, heavy. It was during the war, she said, her voice barely a whisper. His unit was ambushed. I see. The doctor opened his medical bag, but he didn't pull out a stethoscope. He pulled out a folded piece of paper. And yet, according to this official military document, Lieutenant Michael Sullivan died at Antietam in 62, not Petersburg in 65. The floor dropped out from under her. The man in the grave wasn't her husband. The letters, the official notices, all of it a lie. So you see, Mrs. Sullivan, if that is indeed your name, Lawrence continued, his voice hardening, we have a problem. The pantry door creaked. Just a tiny sound, but Lawrence's head snapped toward it. His hand went back into his bag. This time, it came out holding a small black revolver. You're not here about a mining claim at all, are you? He snarled, pointing the gun not at Eleanor, but at the pantry door where a terrified little girl was hiding. You're here for what's buried beneath it. Time stopped. The gun, the child, the lie unraveling around her. Eleanor knew she had seconds to act, but her mind was blank with terror. She had walked into a trap, and she had led a child into it with her. Just as Dr. Lawrence took a step toward the pantry, the window behind him didn't just break. It exploded. A massive shape burst through the glass in a shower of wooden splinters and jagged shards. A dark, avenging angel, it collided with Dr. Lawrence, sending them both crashing to the floor. The revolver discharged with a deafening roar, the bullet burying itself in the ceiling. Before Eleanor could even process what was happening, the intruder had Lawrence pinned. A powerful hand was wrapped around the doctor's throat, and a wicked-looking knife was pressed against his face. In the flickering lamplight, she saw his eyes. One gray, one blue. It was him, the man from the cemetery, Sarah's giant. Give me one reason, the giant growled, his voice a low thunder. Why I shouldn't carve out your lying tongue. Dr. Lawrence choked, his face turning purple. Blackwood, you don't understand? I understand plenty, the man named Blackwood snapped. Now where's Bishop? Gabriel, Eleanor whispered the name without thinking. Please, don't kill him. Those mismatched eyes flicked to her, a flash of recognition in their depths. Then his focus returned to the doctor. The girl, he demanded. Where is she? Eleanor rushed to the pantry, her hands shaking, and opened the door. Sarah was huddled in a corner, sobbing silently. It's all right, Eleanor murmured, helping the trembling child to her feet. We need to go. Now. Gabriel Blackwood hauled Dr. Lawrence up, the knife still at his throat. You're going to walk out of here, Doc, and you're going to take a message to Harrison. Tell him the Raven is watching. Tell him I know what's buried at the bottom of a Salvation mine. Lawrence's eyes bulged with terror. He nodded frantically. And if you ever point a gun at a child again, Gabriel whispered, the words more terrifying than any shout, I'll show you exactly what I learned behind enemy lines. He shoved the doctor toward the broken door. Lawrence scrambled out into the night, leaving his gun and his medical bag behind. The silence that fell was deafening, broken only by Eleanor's own pounding heart. Gabriel Blackwood stood in the middle of her wrecked cabin, a giant of a man dusted with broken glass. A thin line of blood trickled down his cheek. His gaze, when it finally settled on Eleanor, was fierce, but there was something else there too, something gentle. Mrs. Sullivan, he said, his voice now calm, I believe we need to leave. Who are you? She stammered, holding Sarah close. How do you know my name? A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I'm the man your husband asked to protect you. He glanced down at the terrified child hiding in Eleanor's skirts, and his entire expression softened. Hello, little one, he said gently. I see you got my wooden bird. Sarah peeked out, her fear slowly turning to awe. You're the giant from the creek. Some call me that, he admitted. He moved to the desk, opened the drawer, and took out Michael's Bible as if he knew exactly where it was. He handed it to her. You'll need this. How did you know? Michael showed me, Gabriel said, his face darkening. The last time I saw him alive. The sound of approaching horses cut through the night. Harrison was coming. They were out of time. Eleanor made a decision. She knelt down to Sarah. Do you know the way to your grandmother's house from here? The little girl nodded. Good. I need you to go there, as fast as you can. Tell her to pack. Then you both hide in that special place she knows about. Can you do that for me? Sarah nodded again, her face solemn. Gabriel opened the back door. I'll make sure she gets away safe, he said to Eleanor. Meet me at Whispering Creek, at the Rock Arch. 1 hour. 1 hour. Eleanor nodded. As Gabriel and Sarah melted into the darkness, Eleanor grabbed what she could. The Bible, the key from Martha, a small portrait of Michael, and the little revolver he'd insisted she learn to use before he left for the war. A gun she hadn't touched in years. The shouts of men were getting closer, their horses thundering through the trees. Time was up. Eleanor Sullivan slipped out the back door and ran, plunging into a darkness filled with unknown dangers, but also, just maybe, the truth. Whispering Creek. The name was fitting. The water murmured over the stones, sharing secrets with the night. Eleanor arrived breathless, her lungs burning, her dress torn. She had run a winding, difficult path through the foothills, hearing the sounds of Harrison's men crashing through the woods behind her. But they hadn't found her. She hid beneath the natural rock arch Gabriel had described, a cathedral of stone against the moonlit sky. Had she made a mistake? Trusting this stranger, this giant with mismatched eyes who had appeared in her life with such violence? He said he was Michael's friend, but Michael was dead, or was he? The lies were a tangled web in her mind. Dr. Lawrence said Michael had died in 62, but the army said 65. Which was the truth? Or were they both lies? You made it. The voice came from above. She looked up. Gabriel was perched on top of the arch, a dark silhouette against the stars. He dropped down beside her, landing as softly as a cat. Sarah? Was the first word out of her mouth. Safe, he confirmed. With her grandmother. Martha was already packing. Said she'd been expecting trouble. His strange eyes studied her face in the moonlight. You're bleeding. He was right. A branch had scratched her cheek. She hadn't even felt it. He handed her a clean handkerchief. Up close, she could see the man, not just the myth. He was older than she'd thought, his face a roadmap of hard living. A jagged scar ran from his temple to his jaw. And those eyes. One stormy gray, one piercing blue. They seemed to see right through her. Why? She asked, her voice trembling. Why are you helping me? He was silent for a long moment, his gaze scanning the darkness. Michael saved my life at Antietam, he said finally, his voice low and rough. Took a saber that was meant for me. The blow that gave me this, he touched the scar, would have killed me. Your husband saved me. You served together? She asked. A strange, closed-off look came over his face. In a way, we were part of a special unit, the Black Ravens, scouts, intelligence. We did. Other things. Things that don't go in the official reports. Michael had never spoken of such a thing. He described the war in vague, sanitized terms, protecting her from the ugly truth. But the ugly truth had found her anyway. You said you saw him before he died, she pressed. But the report, it said Petersburg in 65. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. Is that what they told you? The War Department, she confirmed. I received his personal effects. His letters. Are you saying that wasn't true? Her voice cracked. I'm saying, Gabriel said, his tone heavy, that Michael Sullivan was more than a lieutenant. After Antietam, he was recruited for specialized work. Work that officially didn't exist. Work that brought him here to Colorado in the spring of 64. Impossible. Her world tilted on its axis. He wrote to me, she insisted. From Virginia. I have the letters. Written by Michael, I'm sure, Gabriel said gently, but not sent from Virginia. He pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat. This was his last message to me. The moonlight was faint, but she could make out Michael's familiar scrawl. It wasn't a letter, it was a report. Found it. Worse than we thought. Harrison involved. Mining camp accident was deliberate. They're all buried in the lower shaft. Deed registered in E's name as insurance. Bishop suspects. Moving everything tonight. If I don't make it, get E. Trust no one. M. This is dated April 1864, she whispered, the paper trembling in her hand. More than a year before they told me he died. Michael was killed on April 17th, 1864, Gabriel said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, at a place called Salvation Mine, shot in the back by Randall Bishop, Harrison's enforcer. No, the word was a silent scream in her mind. The letters she'd received for almost a year after that date. Forgeries, Gabriel confirmed, as if reading her thoughts. Well-crafted ones to give them time, to make sure you never came looking for what he found. The solid rock of the arch felt like the only thing holding her up. The world was spinning, a nightmare of lies and deceit. Why? She choked out. What did he find? Gold, Gabriel said, the word like a curse. The richest vein in the territory, hidden under an old played-out silver mine. Michael and his partner bought the claim legally, but when they struck gold, Harrison and his cronies decided they wanted it. The mining accident, she whispered, remembering Sarah's father. No accident. Gabriel's face was a mask of cold fury. Harrison brought in a crew of Mexican miners, 16 men. When they found paperwork proving Michael's ownership, Harrison had Bishop collapse the shaft, buried them all alive. Bile rose in her throat. 16 innocent men, murdered. Martha Morgan knows, she realized. Her husband was the foreman, the only one they pulled out alive. He told her everything before he died. Harrison has kept her drugged and dismissed as a crazy old woman ever since. It all clicked into place. The warnings, the threats. Dr. Lawrence. They all thought she knew. They thought she'd come for the mine, for the gold. They think you've come for justice. Gabriel corrected her, his voice grim. And that makes you a hell of a lot more dangerous than someone just looking for gold. A sound in the distance, a horse's whinny. Gabriel's hand went to the revolver at his hip. His body went rigid. We need to move, he whispered. They're checking the trails. Where can we go? He looked at her, his mismatched eyes gleaming in the dark. To the one place they'll never expect us to go, he said, to the mine itself. For 2 years she had mourned a hero who died in a war. But the truth was so much uglier. Her husband was murdered for greed, his death covered up by an elaborate, cruel lie. And the men who did it were now hunting her. As Gabriel led her deeper into the sheltering darkness of the pines, a new feeling began to replace the grief. It was cold, sharp, and clear. It was rage. They moved through the night, silent ghosts on a mountain that kept deadly secrets. Gabriel knew the land like the back of his hand, guiding her along game trails and dry creek beds, leaving no tracks for Bishop's men to follow. By dawn, they reached a rocky outcropping with a view of Red Mesa below. The town looked peaceful, smoke curling from chimneys, a picture of quiet frontier life. It was a lie. The town was a tomb, built on a foundation of murder and greed. Rest here, Gabriel said, his voice a low rumble. I'll keep watch. Eleanor sank onto a flat rock, her muscles screaming in protest. She opened Michael's Bible, her last link to the man she thought she knew. Her fingers traced the dedication he'd written on the flyleaf. To my beloved Eleanor, my light in dark places. Had he known even then what darkness lay ahead? May I see that? Gabriel's voice startled her. He had moved without a sound. She handed him the Bible. He didn't read it. He turned it over, examining the worn leather spine with an expert's eye. Michael showed me this once, he said. His fingers pressed a specific spot on the binding, then another. To her astonishment, a small section of the spine popped loose, revealing a hidden compartment, hollowed out of the book itself. He taught me the trick, Gabriel explained. Said it's how he smuggled information across enemy lines. From the tiny compartment, he carefully pulled a tightly folded piece of paper. I believe this, he said, handing it to her, is what Harrison is really afraid of. With trembling fingers, she unfolded it. It was a map, a hand-drawn, incredibly detailed map of Salvation Mine. One area was circled in red ink. Next to it, in Michael's handwriting, main gold deposit, estimated value 500,000 plus. $500,000, she breathed. In 1865, that was a king's ransom, enough to build an empire, enough to kill for. At minimum, Gabriel confirmed, his face grim. Enough to make a few men wealthy beyond imagination. She looked closer at the map. There was another mark, a small X in a side tunnel, with a note, evidence cache, floor stone marked with cross. He hid the proof, she realized. The deed, evidence of the murders. It's all still in the mine. Which is why they can never let you get near it, Gabriel said. Not alive, anyway. She folded the map, her mind racing. Martha's key, she said. That's what it unlocks. A strong box. Most likely, Gabriel agreed. His head snapped up, listening. The distant sound of hoofbeats. Multiple riders coming up the trail from town. Gabriel crawled to the edge of the outcropping, peering down. 5 riders, he reported, his voice tight with tension. And Bishop is leading them. From their hiding place, she could see them. 5 men moving with the grim purpose of hunters closing in on their prey. The man in the lead was Randall Bishop, the man who had shot her husband in the back. A cold, hard knot of hatred formed in her gut. How did they find our trail so quickly? She whispered. They didn't, Gabriel said, his expression darkening. They knew where we were headed. Someone told them. But who? Her own question died on her lips as the answer hit her. Fletcher? She breathed. Michael's partner. Jacob Fletcher, Gabriel confirmed, his voice laced with contempt. He was supposed to meet Michael the night he was killed. He never showed. I always wondered if he was a coward or a traitor. And now he's working for Harrison, she finished, the betrayal a bitter taste in her mouth. Which means they'll be waiting for us at the mine. Yes, Gabriel said. His hand went to the knife at his belt. But what they don't know, he said, and for the first time a grim smile touched his lips, is that there's another way in, a way only Michael and I knew about. How? Because we made it ourselves, he said, the smile widening. Did you think the Black Ravens got their name just because we liked the bird? We were tunnelers, Mrs. Sullivan. We specialized in getting into places no one else could. A tiny flame of hope flickered to life in the darkness of her fear. Then we still have a chance. A slim one, Gabriel cautioned. But yes, we have a chance. Below them, Bishop and his men rode on, completely unaware that their quarry was watching them from above. They were heading into a trap. But what they didn't know was that Eleanor and Gabriel were walking into one of their own. The entire mountain was a tinderbox of greed and murder, and they were about to strike the match. Salvation Mine. The entrance was a dark, gaping mouth in the side of the mountain, framed by rotting timbers. A crooked sign read, Closed, Danger. From 100 yards away, hidden in the pines, they watched. 2 of Harrison's thugs stood guard, rifles in their arms, passing a bottle back and forth. They'd been watching this worthless, abandoned silver mine for 3 years. Or rather, they'd been guarding a $500,000 secret. That's our way, Gabriel whispered, pointing to a barely visible trail that snaked up the ridge. The secondary entrance, a natural crack in the rock that Michael and I widened. It comes out in the eastern shaft, far from those guards. They waited for dusk, the sun bleeding out of the sky, painting the clouds in shades of orange and blood. Eleanor's body ached, but her mind was sharp, honed by adrenaline and a burning need for revenge. Why did you stay? She asked him in the growing twilight. After Michael died, why stay here for 3 years? He was silent for a long time. I stayed to watch, he finally said, and I stayed because Michael asked me to. He knew you'd come. He said you were like a compass, always finding true north. He knew once you found his messages, nothing on earth would stop you from finding the truth. The words hit her with a surprising force. He had known her that well. He had trusted her. I just didn't expect it to take 3 years, Gabriel added softly. Shame washed over her. I couldn't bear to open his Bible, she confessed. It sat in a trunk. It wasn't until last winter that I finally accepted he was gone. Gabriel nodded, his eyes filled with a sad understanding. 3 years or 30, he said. A promise is a promise. There was something more in his voice. You and Michael, she said. You were more than just soldiers. Brothers, Gabriel said simply, not by blood, by choice. He turned to her, his face serious in the dim light. The man you knew, Mrs. Sullivan, That was only part of who he was. The war, it changed us. The things we did in the Black Ravens. They weren't the kind of things a man writes home about to his wife. He was telling her that her gentle, poetry-loving husband had been a killer, a spy, a man who lived and worked in the shadows. Does that change how you feel about him? Gabriel asked, watching her face. She thought about it. The lies, the secrets, the man she'd married and the stranger she was just learning about. It changes what I know about him, she said finally, but not who he was, not at his core. A flicker of respect, of understanding, passed over Gabriel's scarred face. He was right about you, he said quietly. He said you had the strongest heart of anyone he'd ever known. The sun finally slipped behind the mountains. The guards at the mine entrance were getting sloppy, drinking heavily. It was time. Stay close, Gabriel ordered, his voice all business now. Step where I step, and if I tell you to run, you run. No questions. She nodded. She was ready. They were two broken people, a widow and a scarred soldier, bound by a promise to a dead man. And they were walking back into the place where he died, to uncover a truth that a whole town was willing to kill to keep buried. The entrance was a jagged crack in the rock, hidden by a tangle of raspberry bushes. It was invisible. Gabriel lit a small lantern, the flame casting dancing shadows on his scarred face. I'll go first, he said. It's a tight squeeze. He slipped into the fissure and was gone. For a heartbeat, Eleanor was alone in the vast, silent wilderness. She could turn back. She could run, disappear, leave the ghosts of Red Mesa behind. But that wasn't why she was here. She took a deep breath and followed him into the mountain. The rock walls pressed in, cold and claustrophobic. The air was damp, thick with the smell of wet stone and metal. Ahead, Gabriel's lantern was a lone star in the absolute darkness. Almost there, his voice echoed back. The passage opened into a small chamber. Tool marks scarred the walls. Michael and I spent 2 weeks widening this, Gabriel said, holding the lantern high. The main shaft is through there. He pointed to a squared-off tunnel, shored up with heavy timbers. The weight of the mountain above them was a physical presence. The silence was immense, heavy. Which way? She asked, her voice a whisper. The evidence cache is about a quarter-mile in, he said, leading the way into the tunnel. Near the main ore chamber. Their footsteps were the only sound, swallowed by the oppressive darkness. She could feel Michael here. She imagined him walking these same passages, his heart filled with the thrill of discovery, never knowing that death was stalking him in the dark. A sound, a faint scraping noise from deeper in the mine. They both froze. It came again, unmistakable. Footsteps. Someone else was in the mine. Gabriel extinguished the lantern instantly, plunging them into a blackness so total it felt like being buried alive. His hand found her arm, his grip firm. Don't move, he breathed into her ear. A faint light appeared down the tunnel, growing brighter. Voices drifted toward them. Wasted time, one man grumbled. Ain't nobody been in here for years. Bishop says check it. We check it, another voice answered. Eleanor's heart hammered against her ribs. Gabriel's hand moved from her arm to the revolver at his hip. Stay here, he whispered, his voice deadly calm. If anything happens, run. Don't wait for me. Before she could protest, he melted away into the darkness. She was alone, pressed against the cold stone wall, as the light and the voices grew closer. She held her breath, trying to will herself invisible. The lantern light spilled into the chamber, revealing two rough-looking men, both carrying rifles. They were Harrison's men. They scanned the chamber, their eyes passing right over the deep shadow where she was hiding. Where was Gabriel? What was he planning? The answer came from above. A dark shape dropped from the ceiling rafters, landing silently behind the first man. There was a choked cry, a brief, brutal struggle, and the man crumpled to the floor. The second man whirled around, raising his rifle, but he was too slow. Gabriel was on him, moving with impossible speed. A sickening thud, a gasp, and the second man was down. It was over in seconds. Gabriel retrieved the fallen lantern. Both men were unconscious but alive. You didn't, she started, stepping out of the shadows. They're just hired guns, Gabriel said, already binding their hands with strips of their own shirts. Probably don't know the full story. Besides, he added, a cold glint in his eye, dead men can't answer questions. He woke the first man up with a slap. The man's eyes widened in terror as he focused on Gabriel's scarred face. You're the giant, the crazy mountain man. I prefer Gabriel, he said conversationally. Now, who sent you in here? Fletcher, the man stammered. He told Bishop. There might be evidence hidden in this section. Something about a strongbox. Eleanor and Gabriel exchanged a look. Fletcher, the betrayer, was still pulling the strings. Where is Bishop now? Gabriel demanded. Main entrance, the man babbled. With most of the men. He sent us back here, just in case. Gabriel gagged them both efficiently. That'll keep them quiet, he told Eleanor. But we need to move, fast. Bishop will send more men when these two don't report back. He led her to a narrow opening on the far side of the chamber, a natural fissure in the rock. Michael found this by accident, he explained. It's not on any of the mind maps. That's why he chose it. The tunnel twisted and turned, finally opening into a small secret chamber. And there in the center of the floor was a flat stone. A cross was chiseled into its surface, just like the map said. This is it, she breathed. Together they heaved the stone aside. Beneath it was a shallow hole, and nestled inside was a metal strongbox, covered in dust and cobwebs. Her hands trembled as she took out the brass key from Martha. It slid into the lock, a rusty scrape of metal on metal, and the lock turned. She lifted the lid. Inside lay a stack of folded documents, a small leather-bound journal, and a canvas pouch that clinked with the sound of gold coins. Gabriel picked up the top document. The original deed to the mine, he said, his voice filled with grim satisfaction. Eleanor picked up the journal. It was Michael's. His handwriting filled the pages. She flipped to the final entry, dated April 16th, 1864, the day before he died. Bishop spotted me leaving the mine office, unsure if he suspects. Moving all evidence to secure location tonight. F to meet me at Lightning Tree Pass at midnight. If all goes well, we ride for Denver tomorrow. Left-coded message for E in Bible. She'll understand if anything happens to me. God willing, I'll see her again soon. Tears blurred her vision. He had been so close to getting away, to coming home to her. But Fletcher, his partner, his friend, never showed up. Bishop was waiting for him instead. He knew, she whispered. Michael knew Fletcher might betray him. That's why he hid this separately, why he left the message for me. A noise from the tunnel, footsteps, fast, multiple sets. Time's up, Gabriel said, grabbing the documents and shoving them and the journal into Eleanor's satchel. Take these. Whatever happens, get them to the territorial marshal in Denver. I'm not leaving you, she cried. This isn't a debate. His voice was like steel. He extinguished the lantern, drew his revolver, and stood between her and the tunnel entrance. In the sudden, terrifying darkness, his voice was quiet, intense. There's another way out, a ventilation shaft, back of the chamber. It's narrow, but you can make it. Gabriel. Go, Eleanor, he said, and the sound of her first name on his lips was a physical blow. Please. The chamber exploded with light as multiple lanterns flooded the entrance. The last thing she saw before scrambling for the shaft was Gabriel Blackwood, standing tall, his revolver steady, aimed at the men pouring into the room. She clawed her way up the ventilation shaft, the rough stone tearing at her hands, her lungs burning. Behind her, 3 gunshots echoed through the mountain. Gabriel's? Or theirs? She didn't know. She burst out into the star-filled night, gasping for air on a rocky ledge high above the mine's main entrance. Below, the area was swarming with men in torchlight. And then she saw him. 2 of Harrison's thugs were dragging Gabriel toward a fire. He was hurt. Blood soaked the side of his shirt. He was alive, but he was their prisoner. Randall Bishop stepped forward and struck Gabriel across the face with his fist. Eleanor bit her lip so hard she tasted blood. They forced Gabriel to his knees in front of Bishop and Mayor Harrison. Where is she? Bishop snarled. Where's the Sullivan woman? Gabriel lifted his head, defiant even in defeat. Gone, he rasped. Far from here by now. With everything you tried to hide. Bishop hit him again, this time with the butt of his revolver. Eleanor's mind raced. She had to do something. A distraction. Anything. Her hand found a loose rock. Without thinking, she hurled it with all her strength at a lantern hanging from a support beam. A satisfying crash. Darkness. Confusion. Men shouting. In the chaos, she saw Gabriel wrench free, saw him land a brutal punch on Bishop's jaw. And then, impossibly, he looked right up at her hiding place. His eyes found hers. It was a silent command. Go. Now. She turned and ran, scrambling along the treacherous ridge. Behind her, more shouts, another gunshot. She had bought him a chance, but now they knew she was close. The evidence in her satchel felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. It was Michael's legacy. It was Gabriel's sacrifice. And now it was her burden alone. Whatever the cost, she had to get it to Denver. For Michael, for Gabriel, and for the 16 souls buried in the dark heart of Salvation Mine. A final, single gunshot echoed across the mountainside. Then a terrifying absolute silence. She stumbled through the pre-dawn gloom, exhaustion a laid weight in her bones. The single gunshot echoed in her memory. Was it Gabriel's end, or his escape? She didn't know. All she knew was she had to keep moving. But where? A memory sparked. Sarah's words about her grandmother's special place near Whispering Creek. It was a desperate hope, but it was all she had. She found the creek, its gentle murmuring a balm to her frayed nerves. And then, a barely visible path leading into a stand of aspen trees. It led to a small cliff face in a shadow that turned out to be the entrance to a cave. "Hello," she called softly. "Martha. Sarah." The vines covering the entrance parted. Martha Morgan stood there, an old rifle in her arms, her eyes clear and sharp. She was not the mad woman the town believed her to be. "Eleanor Sullivan," Martha said, her voice strong. "I've been expecting you." Sarah darted out and threw herself into Eleanor's arms. Safe. They were safe. "Gabriel," Eleanor asked, her heart in her throat. "Is he here?" "No, child," Martha said, her expression softening. "Not yet. Not yet." Two small words brimming with hope and dread. Eleanor told them everything. The strong box, the capture, the escape, the final terrible gunshot. "Gabriel is resourceful," Martha said, her faith unwavering. "I wouldn't count him gone until I saw his body with my own eyes." As Martha bandaged Eleanor's torn hands, she laid out the plan. "Tonight, you leave for Denver. Take the evidence to Judge Hollister. He's one of the few men Harrison can't buy." "I'm not leaving without Gabriel," Eleanor said, the words fierce. "Child," Martha's voice was gentle but firm. "Your husband died for that evidence. Gabriel risked his life for it. Would you waste their sacrifice now?" She was right. Eleanor knew she was right, but it felt like a betrayal. Just then, a sound from outside the cave, the sharp, metallic click of a rifle being cocked. "Come on out," a familiar voice called. "Hands where I can see them." Jacob Fletcher, Michael's partner, Michael's betrayer. He had found them. Eleanor stepped out into the morning sun, her satchel of evidence clutched to her chest. Fletcher stood alone, his rifle aimed squarely at her heart. He looked older, broken. The swagger of a successful man was gone, replaced by the stoop of a coward. "Why, Fletcher?" she asked, her voice shaking with rage and grief. "Why did you betray him?" A bitter laugh escaped his lips. "I'm a survivor, Mrs. Sullivan. Something your husband never managed to be. Michael was a fool. He thought he could fight men like Harrison with paper and principles. He stood for what was right," she shot back. "Something you wouldn't understand." "Enough talk," Fletcher snarled. "Give me the satchel." "And then what? You shoot me like Bishop shot Michael?" "I'm not Bishop," he said, and for a moment, a flicker of the man he used to be, Michael's friend, showed in his eyes. "Give me the evidence, and I'll let you walk away. Take the girl and her grandmother. Leave the territory and never come back." She was tempted, so tempted, to take Sarah and Martha and just run, to leave the ghosts and the gold behind. But Michael's voice echoed in her memory. Some fights you can't walk away from, Ellie. I can't do that, Fletcher, she said quietly. He sighed, a sound of genuine regret. Then I'm sorry. He raised the rifle to his shoulder. Time seemed to slow. This was it. This was the end. A gunshot cracked through the clearing, but it wasn't Fletcher's. He staggered, a look of pure shock on his face. A red stain blossomed on his chest. As he crumpled to the ground, a figure stepped out from the trees. Tall, broad-shouldered, his left arm hung uselessly at his side, his shirt dark with blood. But he was alive. It was Gabriel. No more betrayals, Fletcher, he said quietly to the fallen man. Then he looked up, and his mismatched eyes, one gray, one blue, met hers across the clearing. You're alive, she whispered, the words catching in her throat. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I made a promise. He had escaped. After her distraction, he'd taken a bullet to the shoulder, but managed to slip away in the chaos. He'd been tracking Fletcher, knowing the traitor would eventually lead him to her. Now they were together again, but they were far from safe. Fletcher's friends won't be far behind, Gabriel said, his voice strained with pain. We need to move. Where? Martha asked, emerging from the cave with Sarah. Harrison's men are watching every road. Not every road, Gabriel said, his eyes finding Eleanor's. There's another way, but it means going back. Back into the darkness, back into the mountain. The mine, Eleanor breathed. There's another way out through the mine. A tunnel, Gabriel confirmed. One Michael and I dug. It connects to an old Spanish prospect shaft on the other side of the mountain. Harrison doesn't know about it. No one does. It was their only chance, a desperate, dangerous gamble, to walk back into the lion's den, into the collapsing, treacherous tomb of Salvation Mine. But they had to try. For Michael, for the 16 murdered men, and for each other. As they set off, Eleanor walked beside Gabriel. His presence was a solid, reassuring weight against the fear that threatened to consume her. They were a strange little family of survivors. The teacher, the soldier, the old woman, and the orphan. All of them scarred by the greed buried in that mountain. All of them bound together by a quest for a justice that seemed impossibly far away. They were heading back into the heart of darkness, but for the first time since this nightmare began, Eleanor Sullivan felt a flicker of something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. The mine was a trap. They knew it. They slipped in through a high ventilation shaft, avoiding the guards at the main entrance. The air inside was cold, heavy, smelling of damp earth and something else. Dynamite. They're not searching anymore, Gabriel said grimly, as a distant rumble shook the tunnel around them. They're trying to collapse the mine, bury the evidence, and us with it. Harrison was desperate. He would rather destroy his $500,000 prize than let them escape. Their only hope was Gabriel's secret tunnel, a phantom passage on the far side of the mine. They moved quickly, their lantern casting long, dancing shadows. Deeper and deeper they went into the oldest sections, through natural limestone caverns that glittered with crystals. It was a beautiful, terrifying world, a labyrinth of stone and shadow. Another explosion, closer this time, rocked the cavern. A massive stalactite crashed from the ceiling, shattering just feet from where they stood. Run! Gabriel yelled. They fled into a man-made tunnel, the explosions coming faster now, the entire mountain groaning around them. Dust choked the air. Rocks rained down. The tunnel ahead was their goal, the entrance to the escape route. They were almost there when the world came apart. A deafening roar. The timber supports splintered. The ceiling collapsed. A wall of rock and debris crashed down, separating them. Eleanor and Sarah were on one side, in the small chamber with the escape tunnel. Gabriel and Martha were on the other, trapped behind tons of fallen rock. Gabriel! Martha! Eleanor screamed into the dust. We're here! A muffled voice came back. It was Gabriel. Are you and Sarah all right? Yes, are you? A pause, then Martha's voice, remarkably steady. Just scrapes. We're alive. But they were trapped. The tunnel was completely blocked, and the mine was still coming down around them. The escape tunnel, Gabriel's voice came through the rock. Eleanor, you have to go. Take Sarah. Take the evidence. Follow it to daylight. No, she cried, clawing uselessly at the rocks. I'm not leaving you. There is no other way. His voice was raw with desperation. Michael died for this evidence. Don't let it be for nothing. Go. Martha's voice came then, gentle but firm. You go with Mrs. Sullivan, Sarah. Be brave for me. Tears streamed down Eleanor's face as she took the sobbing child's hand. She looked back at the wall of rock that separated her from the man who had saved her life, from the woman who had shown her such strength. I'll come back for you, she promised, her voice breaking. I swear it. I know you will. Gabriel's voice was a soft whisper from beyond the rubble. Now go, Eleanor. Finish what Michael started. She ducked into the narrow escape tunnel, pulling Sarah with her, leaving them behind in the collapsing darkness of Salvation Mine. They crawled for what felt like an eternity through the tight, dark passage. Behind them, the sounds of the dying mountain faded. Ahead, a faint draft of fresh air, a pinprick of light. They burst out into the late afternoon sun, into a hidden ravine, scratched and bruised, but alive. They had escaped, but the victory felt empty. Gabriel and Martha were still in that tomb. We have to get help, Eleanor said, more to herself than to the exhausted child beside her. Following Gabriel's last instructions, they found the old stagecoach road to Denver. But they weren't alone. A group of riders appeared. It was Bishop and his men. They had guessed their route. Eleanor and Sarah dove into the woods, hiding behind a fallen log, their hearts pounding as the riders thundered past. The road was no longer safe. They were trapped in the wilderness, with killers hunting them. Just as despair began to set in, they heard a new sound. A wagon. A simple farm wagon, driven by an old man and a younger woman. It was a terrible risk, but they had no other choice. Eleanor stepped out onto the road. The old farmer, Abner, listened to her frantic story. His eyes were kind. Anyone running from Harrison, he said, is a friend of ours. He hid them in the back of the wagon under a pile of blankets, and they continued on toward a small town called Patterson's Crossing, a town with a telegraph office. They arrived after dark. The telegraph operator, a man named Frank, sent her message rocketing across the wires to Judge Hollister in Denver. Evidence of murder. Harrison responsible. Need help. Witnesses trapped in collapsing mine. Then the agonizing wait. Hours crawled by. Eleanor sat by the window of the small room above the store, watching the empty street, clutching the satchel of evidence. Every shadow looked like one of Bishop's men. Every sound was a threat. Late that night, the telegraph key began to click. A reply from the judge himself. Hold position. Federal marshals dispatched. Arriving tomorrow afternoon. Secure evidence. Remain vigilant. Help was coming, but tomorrow afternoon felt like a lifetime away. Morning came. The town was quiet. Too quiet. Eleanor looked out the window, and her blood ran cold. Randall Bishop and 4 of his men were in the street, right outside the store. He'd found them. We know they're in there, storekeeper. Bishop was shouting at Frank. Fugitives, wanted for the murder of Jacob Fletcher. They were being framed. It was a death sentence. The marshals were hours away. They were trapped. Just as Bishop's men started to move toward the door, another sound filled the air. Hoofbeats. Dozens of them, thundering into town from the east. A company of riders, led by a tall man with a federal marshal's badge pinned to his chest, swarmed into the street surrounding Bishop and his men. Randall Bishop, the marshal's voice boomed, you're under arrest for the murder of 16 minors and for the murder of federal agent Michael Sullivan. Federal agent. The words hit Eleanor like a lightning strike. Michael hadn't just been a soldier. He'd been an undercover agent for the Treasury Department. Another secret, another layer to the man she thought she knew. Bishop, cornered and betrayed, went for his gun. He was fast, but the marshal was faster. A single shot echoed through Patterson's Crossing. Bishop crumpled to the ground, his reign of terror over. And then Eleanor saw him. Stepping out from behind the marshal was a tall, familiar figure. He was limping, his arm in a sling, but he was alive. It was Gabriel. Beside him, leaning on a deputy for support, was Martha. Eleanor flew down the stairs. Sarah's cry of, "Grandma!" filled the room as she launched herself into Martha's arms. Eleanor's eyes found Gabriel's across the crowded store. He limped toward her, his mismatched eyes saying everything his words didn't need to. They had found another way out, an old Spanish tunnel. They had reached a ranger station and alerted the authorities, who had already been on their way thanks to her telegraph. Harrison was in custody. His entire criminal enterprise had crumbled. It was over. "What will you do now?" Gabriel asked her quietly, as the marshals cleaned up the last of the mess. "The mine is yours now. You're a very wealthy woman." The gold. The blood-soaked gold that had started it all. "I don't want it," she said, the decision coming to her with absolute clarity. "It will become a trust for the families of the men who died. A memorial." A ghost of a smile touched Gabriel's lips. Michael would have liked that. "And you?" she asked. "What will you do?" "I don't know," he admitted. "For 3 years, my only purpose was keeping a promise to a dead man." "You're the man who kept faith when no one else did," she said, her voice soft. "That's more than a purpose. It's a beginning." A small hand slipped into hers. It was Sarah. She looked up at Gabriel. "Grandma says you're family now," she said with the simple wisdom of a child. "She says you belong with us." The journey to Denver was ahead of them. Justice was waiting. A future uncertain and unwritten lay beyond. Eleanor Sullivan had come to Red Mesa to mourn a husband. She was leaving with a new family, a new purpose, and a man whose broken pieces seemed to fit perfectly with her own. She had walked through the valley of the shadow of death, but she was walking out into the sun. If this story of a promise kept from beyond the grave, of justice finally served in the dusty plains of the Old West, kept you on the edge of your seat, then you know what to do. Hit that like button and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss another story that will leave you breathless. And let me know in the comments below. What do you think was the biggest betrayal in this entire story? Let's talk about it. Until next time, stay vigilant.